Let's start off with who are 8Light. So essentially 8Light is a software consultancy company. But the difference is a core tenet to their DNA is this concept of software craftsmanship. So software craftsmanship as a term has always resonated with me. Like if you think of craftsmanship, what it is, it's like somebody building something with their hands. If you think of like a metal worker making something with metal, or a woodworker carving something out, that metaphor really resonates with me. In the terms of like software craftsmanship, you know, like a woodworker has a chisel, or a metal worker has a hammer. In software craftsmanship, it's a little more virtual than that. Talking about like a software developer with a keyboard. So there's a bit of a leap there. And while that gives you an understanding of software craftsmanship, it still feels a little bit blurry, right? Often in the early days, people would ask me like, what's the difference between agile and craftsmanship? Where does this fit in? And it's hard to differentiate these concepts because they often bleed into each other, and advocates of like agile will also be very pro some craftsmanship concepts and vice versa. So essentially craftsmanship, if we look at it from the lens of culture, it's a lot easier to understand. So to understand culture, we could talk about it, but there are various models that make it a lot easier. And the one model that, just a quick saying around models, all models are wrong, some models are useful. So this is a model that is wrong, that I still find very, very useful. And it's a model called the Schneider model for cultural compatibility. And what they do is they map out in 4 quadrants different components. So we have this quadrant called the collaboration quadrant, and collaboration culture is about working together. Control culture is about getting and keeping control. Cultivation culture is about learning and growing with a sense of purpose. And then competence culture is about being the best at what you do. And if we mapped out different paradigms in our software industry against this model, we would put agile largely in the collaboration and cultivation. I think it's fair enough to say that's one way of viewing agile. And in light with that, while craftsmanship is close to it, craftsmanship ultimately for me is about technical competence. It's about doing it the best way you can. So with that model in mind, why did I want to go to 8Light? So I'm originally from South Africa, and a couple of years ago I was speaking at an Agile conference, and I came across this guy called Doug Bradbury. And Doug was talking about a really, really interesting topic around, it was called modern day apprenticeships. And he was sharing this model of how at 8Light they were taking people with very little programming experience and taking them through this program of apprenticeship and what they were producing at the end. And I was extremely intrigued, partly because of my own experience when I started with software. So when I started, my job interview was a 20-minute question, like, do you know how to code? And the first day I rocked up, there was a room. They gave me a manual and a computer, and they said, good luck. I worked in a programming language I didn't know. Nobody was there to help me, and they basically gave me a contract to finish in. And that was how I got into software. So the first 10 years of my career, I made the same mistakes over and over again. And what I was seeing with this idea of modern day apprenticeships was they were trying to make people make new mistakes. So they're trying to get them through like the basic mistakes we all make and get them to the more interesting problems. So I was really intrigued. I wanted to, after hearing Doug's talk, I wanted to see if what they said and what they did really mapped out to be the same thing. Because it's one thing to talk at a conference and say this is what we do. It's another thing to actually go and see it go. So how did I get there? Well, in NYW we have the Into Tomorrow competition. This is I don't know if it's well known in Richmond. Who here knows about the Into Tomorrow competition? One or two. Okay, so this is a gem, right? If you put a proposal through of an experience that you would love to have, that you can also see helping the organization, and you win, they will give you $5,000 in 5 days paid time to have that experience. And they select a winner once every 6 months. So I knew about this and I was keeping dead secret about it in Auckland until I got my proposal to go into A-Flight. And ironically, if I look at how much the trip cost me, it ended up costing me $5,100. So it cost me $100 to have this experience. So that was pretty cool. So how did the week go? Basically, the way I formatted the week was a series of interviews. So A-Flight said they're more than happy to have me. The challenge that they have is I would need to fit around their people. So I came in each day, I'd set up times with different people, and I would have an interview with different people to get different angles of how they did things. I also spent one of the mornings pairing with one of the apprentices. I thought that was really important to get a technical feel for where they were at. And that's pretty much the format of the day, or the format of the week. And I basically repeated that for the entire week, came out with a bunch of recordings. Yes, Matt.
Did you pair with any of their craftspersons?
I didn't get to pair with their craftspersons, but I got to pair with the apprentices. Yeah. And I was blown away from the experience. I would have hired that person straight away. It was really, really good. So, why apprenticeships? So I need to stress this isn't what A-Flight said. This is just what I gleaned from the conversations. First of all, in Chicago, there's a shortage of software professionals, just like anywhere else. So they have the shortage of professional, experienced software developers. The people at A-Flight feel that a CS grad is overpriced for the value that they get. So they're going, based on the experience and what you get from somebody graduating from the academic institutions, we're paying way too much for them. They also, yeah.
So should I be asking questions, or do you want to wait to the end?
So you can jump in, but we'll also have time at the end for Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
After the apprentices graduate from the program, are they getting salary which is similar to what a grad would get?
So we'll get to that. Okay. We will get there. Okay. So they're going, CS grads are overpriced. Also, fundamentally for them as an organization, sharing and growing people is just something they value. Everybody I spoke to, this was a value that resonated with them and something that they were invested in. And they're also a highly values-driven organization. So if you can take away a lot of the technical competency requirements to bring somebody in, you can focus more on interviewing on values. And that allows them to really pick and choose people that have a strong values match to what they're looking for. So those were the four main reasons I saw with them. So at A-Flight, they this experience. Everybody goes through an apprenticeship. They have the main difference is how fast they go through the apprenticeship. So they're not making the apprenticeship time-based, they're making it competency-based. which kind of like resonates with the technical competency quadrant. They do have three main models of apprenticeships. They have this concept of a learner apprentice. A learner apprentice is somebody that has no programming experience whatsoever. There is no commitment from 8th Light past the apprenticeship. A learning apprenticeship is 3 months, and they teach you how to code and they see how far you can go. You don't get paid. They just give you the space to do, and they provide a mentor for you. The resident apprentice is slightly different. A resident apprentice is somebody that they're going to pay to learn. They want somebody that has some coding ability. It's somebody that can code, that knows the basics already, but they're not looking for any professional experience. So somebody that's completed a course at university is fine, or somebody that's hacked on a project on their own or taught themselves how to program, absolutely fine. They'll go through the resident apprenticeship. And then they also have this concept of a journeyman apprentice. So a journeyman apprentice is somebody that has quite a bit of experience behind them and who has programmed professionally. Typically a resident apprentice will spend 6 months to a year in their apprenticeship program, whereas a journeyman apprentice would spend 3 to 4 months working through the material. And ironically, this comes back to your question around journeyman versus residents. Most of the apprentices they bring in are resident apprentices because they found it's actually easier teaching somebody with a clean slate than it is trying to re-establish. So they actually view that a lot less riskier than hiring people with previous professional experience. So how do you apply to be a resident apprentice? So from an 8th Light's perspective, it's all about filters. The apprenticeship program works really well if they have the appropriate filters up front and getting the right people in the door. So from 8th Light's side, they get a lot of applications. They're a smallish company, sitting with about 200 odd people. They're getting 70 plus applicants a month that are applying to go into their program. Less than 1% actually make it through the initial filter into the apprenticeship. Very, very selective. Kind of the things they look out for is they're looking out for people that have a love for creating software and that have tinkered around with it before, that it's kind of their hobby, but that's not a requirement. They're also, and this is repeated time and time again, they're looking for humble learners, people that can take feedback and learn from it. And then they also want people that are hard workers. 8th Light is not a cruise. You are going to slog while you're there. And that's just part of their culture. They work really, really hard.
So what do they work on? So what's their business model? How do they make money if they keep paying people for learning?
Yeah. So they pay you just enough to cover your basic expenses. The deal is once you move from apprentice to what they would call a crafter, you get quite a substantial pay increase, but you're going straight into a consultancy model. So you're going in at clients and they're billing your time out.
Okay, so they are consultancy.
They're a consultancy, they're not a product company. And I think that that's important from a couple of aspects, and one of it's like why they're teaching people the way they're teaching them.
Do the apprentices go on site to the client before they're completed?
So apprentices will have an opportunity to go on site during their apprenticeship, but the majority of their apprenticeship is spent at 8th Light's offices, working independently on their own stuff. Near the end of their apprenticeship, they go on what they call a pairing tour, where they start mirroring people, and then they'll spend some time with clients, but up till that point, they don't get to see clients at all. The initial thing to apply for their program is they'll ask you to write an essay around what software craftsmanship means to you. And a lot of people, they just filter out of that process. A lot of people just don't bother to write that essay. And again, this is a filter. Then once people have done that, the next step they'll do is they'll give them a coding problem to solve. Now, most of the people applying for the program have no professional programming experience whatsoever. So the problem that they give them is actually quite hard for the level that they're coming in at. The apprentices I spoke to had spent anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple months working on their problem to apply to get to 8 Light.
Wow.
And that's another filter, right? They're looking for people that can work. Once you've, a trick that they've learned or that they've developed is they don't give the people the problem and no code. They now give the people a problem and a partially solved solution, and they ask them just to fix it and correct it. And they found that that makes it easier to evaluate, but it also kind of guides people and gets them started. But regardless of that, when you make your submission, every single person I spoke to was shocked by the feedback that they get. They get an in-depth code review of their submission, extremely detailed, giving them different approaches to take, and then they give each applicant an opportunity to review their submission. And what they're looking for there is it's just another filter. They're looking for people that are humble enough to take that feedback and apply it. And largely, if you applied the feedback, you're in. If you don't take the feedback, you don't do the review, that's the end of the road. So again, it's these filters.
Can I clarify? You're saying that you know, if they've received a submission, they're not satisfied with it. I don't think it's acceptable to bring them into the program right now. They will give them feedback, and then the candidate can act on that feedback and resubmit.
Absolutely. And every single person that gets to a coding thing gets detailed code review. That's just how they approach it. That's part of the way that they do it.
So when people are coming into the organization as already crafters, is that possible that you can enter?
No.
No.
You can't.
So everyone's doing the coding problem?
Everybody comes through the apprenticeship.
So even people with commercial experience, if they were to see code that they weren't satisfied with, they can actually resubmit after that as well?
So we didn't really get into how often they would resubmit, but if you think about it, what are they looking for? They're not looking for people that get it right first time.
No,
they're looking for people that are going to keep working at it.
Yes.
So a resubmission isn't a problem. I didn't ask like the frequency of resubmission, but I don't see that being a problem in their filtering. In fact, that's probably an attribute that's telling you that you really want it.
I'd like to have a chat about how you view our code review problem. Yeah.
That's another conversation. Okay. So we spoke about humble learners. So once you pass through the submission, the final stages, they invite you to spend a day at 8 Light. You will sit and do a pairing problem. You will generally go out to lunch with some crafters from 8 Light. And generally, although you don't know, those crafters are people that they've earmarked to be your mentors down the road. And for them, food seems to be a thing that they really enjoy because it's a way that they get to know people. So
That would be switch code.
Yep. It's also worth mentioning that the mentors in 8 Light are all volunteers. They do this over and above their normal commitments. Everybody at 8 Light is expected to do X number of billable hours a week, and all mentorship is above and beyond. It's done above that. So you don't get paid to do it. It's something you really do because you see value in it.
Is there any negative feedback about that?
None that I found. And I asked a couple of them, like, do you get paid? No, absolutely not. This is how I got into the industry. I'm going to make this difference for somebody else. So this is a value that they do. And my guess is the people that don't value that just don't go the mentorship route. So mentorship is not mandatory at 8 Light. It's volunteer basis. As far as I'm aware, they haven't ever run out of volunteers for mentorships. They generally have more people willing to mentor than they're willing to take on. Also worth mentioning that through the years, they've progressed to a co-mentorship model. So mentors generally work in pairs. If you're mentoring for the first time, you will have a more experienced mentor that you'll pair up with. Another benefit of the co-mentorship model is it gives you redundancy. Because mentors are still have clients doing client work, if an apprentice has a question, they will hit their mentors on Slack, and one of their mentors will get back to them within a reasonable period of time. And usually it's within an hour or two of them asking the question, there's that feedback, even though they're clients doing client work. So that was another interesting thing.
Do apprentices sometimes request other mentors working?
I didn't ask the question, so I don't know. The other benefit of the co-mentorship model is if one of the mentors has a heavy workload, the other mentor kind of steps up, and that just gives them, it also makes it a lot more manageable for them, and it gives them somebody to bounce ideas off on the progress of the apprentice and what they should learn next. Speaking to one or two of the apprentices, they were saying how sometimes the mentors would openly say, look, I agree with your approach, but my co-mentor does not, and that's fine. This is why I think it's a good approach, this is why he doesn't. Just be aware and make a decision yourself. So while they have this underlying value system, it doesn't mean that they agree on everything or that there's a set way.
Do they have a formal, I guess, mentoring plan, or is just on?
So mentors are provided a mentoring handbook, and everybody at 8 Light has been mentored, so everybody knows what the experience is like. They do have 2 people in Chicago, at least, that kind of oversee that program. Ironically, the one person was the very first apprentice at 8 Light. They're still at 8 Light, overseeing the mentorship program. Largely, you're taught to be a mentor through pairing up with another mentor. So you get the handbook, but it's also an on-the-job training, and that's how they grow it. So
Did you get the handbook?
I didn't get the handbook. So there were 2 things I didn't get that I wanted to get. The handbook was one of them, and the other one I'll tell you about later.
Is it paid?
We did approach 8 Light to help them with our graduate program, and if we did engage with them, they would provide us with their handbook.
And
But that's still in discussion stages and budgets. So what does an apprentice need to learn at 8 Light? Essentially, they're putting people in a consultancy model where they don't know what language or what platform or where they're going to be working. And so they come out going, we want apprentices to be able to, once they become a craft, to be able to work anywhere. So the things they focus on are multiple programming paradigms. You need to be comfortable in an object-oriented language. Well, they didn't speak about O. They said a statically typed language, a dynamically typed language, a functional language. They do O, but they want you to come out being a polyglot, basically, but not just knowing the language, knowing the principles behind the language. That's really, really important. And so, in fact, if you come in to the apprenticeship program with knowledge of C#, they'll make sure that you don't touch C# during your apprenticeship, because they want you to get past being held back by a specific programming language. So they focus on the principles of the language. They also focus on TDD. Like TDD is something they just do. It's something they teach from day one. There's actually a really interesting talk about the pitfalls of TDD that a crafter from 8 Light did that you'll see on some of the MYB Slack channels. So if you're interested in seeing that, also give me a shout. And they also spoke about they want apprenticeships to understand fundamentally how the internet works. That sounds really basic, but they're talking about like all the way down to the bare metal. So one of the projects that apprentices do during the apprenticeship is they write an HTTP server from scratch in a language that you can't lean on libraries to make it easy. So they really want you to get like the core of it. They also want you to effectively work in groups and pairs, so they encourage pairing. their environment is conducive to pairing. They encourage pairing with mentors, encourage pairing with crafters, and encourage pairing with other apprentices. And then the final thing that you're trying to grow is your ability to deal effectively with clients. So they talk about like estimating, presenting, speaking, all of these things. They're building into their apprenticeship all the way along, so that by the time you come out of it, you can go into a foreign environment, speak to people that aren't necessarily very technical, and talk about the problems, and then be able to use the tools that you have to solve those problems. The last thing there was their learning is very pragmatic. Like I thought originally about Light that you would go there to learn for the sake of learning. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to teach you to learn, to be able to do. And so they're asking the question all along the way, it's like, why are you learning this? Where's the value going to come? So there's this very pragmatic learning. So what is an average day of an apprentice like? So average day of an apprentice is, well, the crafters and their mentors are working at clients, so there's nobody there that looks after them. They just rock up. They have a stand-up every day where apprentices talk to each other about what they're solving that day, and they look for opportunities to collaborate. Apprentices will also touch base with their mentors every day, generally via Slack, because their mentors are not around. They also have this thing that they call the Zagaku session, which is Japanese for classroom learning. But when I walked in, they have like this big chalkboard, Zagaku, and they have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and different crafters come and present each day on different topics. And then apprentices work on their own stuff. They're filtering for conscientious, task-oriented people, and so they give you ample ability to do your own stuff. If you get stuck, you reach out to your mentor for help, or you reach out to other apprentices or any of the other crafters. And one of the things that they have done is they've picked a common problem that everybody understands, and so you can go to pretty much anybody in 8 Light and share where you're at, and they'll be able to guide you along, so it's not a different problem for different people. That's a normal day at 8 Light. Fridays are slightly different. Fridays, all the crafters don't do client work, they all come back to the office. So at 8 Light, even if you're a consultant, your Fridays are at the office. And typically on Fridays they have learning time, they do carters together, they have a meal together, and their mentors meet with their apprentices to work out what they're going to do for the next week and kind of estimate their time. So that's how they spend their Fridays. The approach that the mentors take is when they start with an apprentice, it's very granular. So it's very clear, very specific technical tasks that they want their apprentices to do. And then the mentor is wearing multiple hats. So as they progress through the mentorship, the mentor starts putting on the customer's hat, starts talking about problems instead of technical things, and sees if the apprentice can break that down into technical approaches. There's the concept of the Dreyfus model, and they apply the Dreyfus model in their apprenticeship. So they're going from very guided to contextual to this is just ingrained in you, this is just your response of how you solve this problem because you've done it so many times. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. Okay. So what sort of problems do apprentices solve? So I spoke about how they have a common set of problems that they work on. The formula that they use for selecting the problems is they want something with a very shallow domain that they can adjust technical parameters to stress different situations. So one of the classic problems at 8 Light is the tic-tac-toe problem. In fact, often when you apply to 8 Light, they'll give you the tic-tac-toe problem to do as your coding problem. Another one is mastermind, but an example of them adjusting tic-tac-toe to stress different situations would be, well, write tic-tac-toe using TED with a 3x3 matrix. Once you've done that, okay, now adjust it so you can handle a 4x4 matrix. Now rewrite it in a functional language using telcall optimization. now write the engine that is going to play as the computer against you in tic-tac-toe. Now expose it through a service layer. Now write a fronting. They just keep stressing the same problem, but from a different technical challenge each time. Another problem that I mentioned, so you have all the different variations of tic-tac-toe. Another problem, this is one that all the crafters at like all the apprentices loved, was writing the HTTP server. It generally took them a couple of weeks to do it. They said it was the most challenging problem that they'd had up to there, and they all loved it. So something I got out of it is when you're working with people at that level, they want to be stretched. They want to feel like they're accomplishing something. This was something that they really very valued. Apart from development work, there are 3 other areas people focus on. At 8Light, everybody's encouraged to blog, to speak or present, and to work with each other. The reason why they encourage the blogging and the that different 8-lighters have written about. Another thing that they really encourage is reading. So it's something I loved at 8Light. You walk in and they're just bookcases all over the place of really, really good programming books. Something I only discovered later on in my career was like the real gold is often not in the blog posts, it's in the material that people have like slaved over and edited and reviewed and stuff like that. And so in 8Light they've got these bookshelves everywhere, and anybody can pull a book, and they have quite a rigorous reading list that they encourage everybody to go through. But it just creates this great learning environment. And for me, this was just one of the secrets to 8Light's like formula is learning's just in their DNA. This is just something they value. Interesting enough, nobody has drill site subscriptions. Nobody does video training, as far as I could tell. It's not something they provide to their people. I was speaking to one of the guys there, and he actively discourages people going onto Stack Overflow because he goes, you should be able to sit and figure this out without going to ask somebody else. So that was quite an interesting learning. How do you progress from apprenticeship to crafter? So the process of becoming a crafter is competency-based. There's no set time period, so each individual progresses at a different speed. If you are ready to make that transition in 6 months, you can make it. If you're ready to do it in a year, you can make it. Generally, at 8Light, they talk about a year. Like if you're not doing it up to, if you don't make it past a year, you're probably not the type of person that they're looking for. And apprentices are on a short-term contract, so at the end of that contract, you would not have employment at 8Light if you didn't make it through. The actual process is a 2-week review. So this was the other thing that I couldn't get them to tell me about. They have a problem at 8Light that they give to all their apprentices at the end of their apprenticeship that they're given 2 weeks to solve. And all I know is it's non-trivial. It takes most apprentices 80 hours a week to solve for 2 weeks, so they're working long hours, and most of them struggle to finish it in that 2-week period. So it really stresses and brings time into that. At the end of that 2-week period, they form a quorum where they bring in 8 other, so the mentors and 6 other people, 6 other crafters that you present your solution. It's a full day review. You do a presentation, they talk about different approaches. It is intense. The Friday that I was at 8Light, they had somebody that had just finished their apprenticeship. And it was a little weird that we had this lunch. At the end of the lunch, I assumed it was the mentor stood up, and it sounds very American, how did I talk about it? But and in a very loud voice, he's like, Joe Bloggs, who's been working as an apprentice, I'm proud to say he has graduated and is now a craftsman or crafter. They use that word interchangeably. And then everybody just goes berserk and applauds and like rahs this person. So it feels very American, but it's also like I came out of it going, they see that as a transition period and as a milestone that everybody in 8 respects. Once you're a crafter, you're considered to be at a high level.
I don't think it's a bad thing to be American, just saying.
Maybe it's just non-South African. A question that was kind of asked, a lot of the apprentices would have, is they don't want to go for 6 months in an apprenticeship and then end up unemployed. The mentors are giving feedback all along. They do have mini reviews every couple of months to make sure that they're happy that people are on track. So in fact, nowadays it's extremely rare for somebody to go through the apprenticeship and not become a crafter because they're reevaluating at regular cadences. And they've also said that pretty early on they know whether it's going to work or not, and they end it pretty quickly if it's not working. So they see that apprenticeship as a filtering process as well. So what are the benefits of what I saw at Light? Firstly, being able to take somebody on with no professional programming experience and create them into somebody that actually has some substance behind them is powerful. Like it changes the way that you recruit. The people that are joining 8 Light are so diverse in their backgrounds. I spoke to somebody with a PhD in mathematics that just joined their apprenticeship program. I spoke to somebody else that had a social science degree. I spoke to somebody else that was a counselor. They're attracting people from all different fields. And these are really, really exceptional people. These are good people. They just happen to be in a different industry. But they would not have gotten a job in the software industry because they lacked experience. And most companies filter out an experience. So the fact that 8 Light is going, no professional experience just opens the pool of who they can bring in. Also, it allows for people from different ages. You're not just going to the CS grad pool, you're going for people that want to make career changes. And there were a couple people that I spoke to that were like, they only saw 8 Light as the route because they couldn't get work anywhere else. And they knew that this was the industry they wanted to transition in, they just didn't have any qualifications to do that.
So, Mark, there is no education prerequisite for 8 Light?
None. Yep. And ironically, in doing that, they've actually
opened their addressable market.
Yeah, and it seems that the people that they're attracting are more educated, which is a little ironic in that sense. In doing so, the other benefit is they're plugged into this wider pool that nobody else is developing. Thirdly, like having seen technical mentorship in action, like I've seen what an impact this has. Like, this is an extremely powerful way of helping people grow and learn. And the pairing experience I had at 8 Light just reiterated that. Mentorship works. And it doesn't just work with the person, the apprentice, the mentor is learning. The mentor is internalizing these concepts. Because once you had to teach somebody else that you know it. So it's a way that they improve even their crafters, another benefit.
Does that mentoring relationship continue once they become a crafter?
So they encourage it to continue. They encourage mentors to maintain that relationship. It's not forced. But because mentors are so personally vested in the progress of the people, they generally care about them and want to know how people are doing. It's not all roses. There are some challenges that I saw. So the first concern is the filters that they're applying remove some of the diversity that we would be looking in a team. For instance, a 2-week period of 80-hour commitment filters out a single parent. Like, how can you do that? Like, that's really hard. So it is filtering out some of the diversity. They're aware of that, and they're trying to adjust where they can still achieve the same things while actively encouraging diversity. And diversity is a big thing at 8Life right now. There's a lot of conversations around that. The second challenge I saw is, while it's really clear for the career path of an apprentice, it's not clear once you become a crafter. So we're all at this equal level, we're all getting paid the same. Now where's my career progression? So this is a problem that they're still trying to figure out. They've spoken about various models. In fact, I think we're probably further ahead in MYB than 8Life is in their sense. And I think it's also due to the fact that they're a consultancy company. Sure. So consultants generally don't climb the corporate ladder. And like, I put this under a challenge, but it's a benefit as well. So generally, because people come out of this apprenticeship program so technically strong, they're in really high demand. So it's like a catch-22. You make people get really good, and now everybody wants to hire them. The culture behind 8Life tends to keep them there. So people generally stay longer, but they have had 1 or 2 instances where somebody will go through the apprenticeship program and another company will just pick them up straight away. And 8Life just can't compete salary-wise because they've basically upskilled them to a point that they're more than that they can pay them. So kind of in closing with it, seeing a values-oriented organization that embraces learning and makes it like fundamental to their core really, really appeals to me. It appeals working with people that have a common set of values and that have a common base of technical understanding. That really resonates with me. And I would really encourage us to embrace a mentorship model. I don't see why this needs to be exclusive to apprenticeships. Something I've started doing in my team is trying to get different people to actively set up mentorship relationships, and I believe that that's something that we should continue to explore. So that's the end of the prepared material. I'm happy if you need to go, you're welcome to go. If you want to stay for, maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions, and then anything after that we can tackle on Slack or one-on-one, because I have a taxi to catch in about 20 minutes. So are there any questions?
Got a question. Sorry, you were.
No, go.
Go ahead, Richard.
It's quick. So with the experiment that you've been running in your crew, how are you supporting the mentors? You know, how there's the support that you need to provide to mentors as well?
Yeah. So we're not going to get mentorship right the first time around. Yeah. Generally, in my crew, the way it works is I will have, as a dev lead, I'll have conversations in my one-on-ones with people on how their mentorship is going. Okay. And that's at the level that it is. The actual mentorship, I've noticed significant improvement in some of the people that are being mentored because they're getting direct feedback from their peers. So it seems to be working, but we could definitely work on providing more guidance around like what works with mentorship.
Sorry, one extension to that same question. Are they actually picking a particular area and mentoring in that particular area, or just like?
Yeah, so the conversation that we have in our space is it's not indefinite. So we talk about setting like a time span and an outcome that you want from that mentorship.
Yes.
Because often you can find that, like once you've learned that thing, maybe that's not the best person to continue being your mentor. So there's a conversation like, we're going to work on this area and I'm going to catch up with you once a week. And we're going to do it for 3 months, and then we're going to reevaluate. So that's what we've been experimenting with. Any other questions?
I have one, Mark. This is Tom. I was just curious if you had any idea how long Atlight had been doing this. You said that their first actual candidate is now actually leading the program.
Yeah.
I was just curious. 10 years?
Yeah, so they've been doing it for 10 years. Their first apprenticeship started with 3 people. It was 3 people in that, and they brought in their first apprentice.
So my question is, how familiar are you with the developer program and the apprenticeships that went on there? Yeah. Because we had that. We had it was a shorter apprenticeship period, but we then moved into a mentoring model with that, and we've been trying to learn from that.
So I see a lot of parallels to what they call a learning apprenticeship and what we were doing in developer. So I think we've run out of time for the room. So thanks all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you have questions, just send me on Slack. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.